The message came on a Tuesday morning. Every screen on Earth flickered at the same moment. Televisions, phones, computers, and even old radio systems crackled with the same transmission. People stopped in the streets. Cars pulled over. The world held its breath. The face that appeared was not human. It had gray skin stretched over a long skull. 4 eyes blinked in sequence. When it spoke, the voice was cold and mechanical, translated into every language simultaneously. Species designation, human. Planet designation, Earth. You have been selected for integration into the Zorathi Dominion. You will surrender your world, your resources, and your population for service to the greater empire. Resistance will result in extinction. You have 72 hours to respond. The transmission ended. Silence followed. High Overseer Veltrak leaned back in his command throne aboard the flagship Eternal Conquest. He had delivered this message to 47 species over his long career. The response was always the same: fear, panic, desperate pleas for mercy. Within days, planetary leaders would contact him, begging for terms. Humans would be no different. Sub-Commander Kethis approached the throne with a data tablet. Overseer, I have completed the analysis of the target species. Veltrak gestured for him to continue. They call themselves humanity. They have existed for approximately 300,000 cycles, but have only achieved space travel in the last century of their time. They possess primitive faster-than-light capability, limited to their own star system. Their population is approximately 10 billion. Kethis paused. They have no unified government. Their world is divided into nearly 200 separate nations, many of which are in conflict with each other. Veltrak made a sound that passed for laughter among his kind. They fight among themselves? How delightfully simple. A species divided cannot stand against the Dominion. Indeed, Overseer, our projections indicate complete surrender within 12 rotations. Their military capabilities are insignificant compared to our fleet. Veltrak nodded slowly. The Zorathi Dominion had conquered 3,000 star systems over 500 years. They had absorbed dozens of species, each one adding to their labor force and resource base. Not once had they faced a true challenge. The galaxy had learned to submit. Humans would learn the same lesson. On Earth, the reaction was exactly what the Zorathi expected at first. Panic spread through cities like wildfire. Stock markets crashed. Religious leaders declared the end of the world. Governments issued conflicting statements. Some called for immediate surrender. Others demanded resistance. Arguments erupted in every capital. Admiral Lisa Hartley sat in a bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains, watching feeds from around the world. She was 62 years old, with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too many wars. She had commanded naval forces in 3 conflicts and had buried more friends than she cared to count. She was not afraid. She was angry. "Get me the Joint Chiefs," she said to her aide. "All of them. Every nation. I do not care about politics or old grudges. We have 72 hours. Across the world, similar conversations were happening. Old enemies looked at each other and saw something they had never noticed before. They saw fellow humans. In Moscow, generals who had spent their careers planning against the West picked up phones and called Washington. In Beijing, officials reached out to Tokyo. In the Middle East, leaders who had not spoken in decades sat down at the same table. The aliens had made a mistake. They had given humanity a common enemy. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the patrol vessel Valiant, stationed in orbit around Jupiter. He was 38 years old, tall and lean, with the calm demeanor of a man who had faced death before and was not impressed by it. His communications officer turned to him. "Sir, we are receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command." Jake nodded. "Put it through." Admiral Hartley's face appeared on the screen. She looked tired but determined. "Commander Morrison, I am transmitting new orders. You are to hold position near the gas giant and observe the approaching alien fleet. Do not engage unless fired upon. We need intelligence. Understood, Admiral. What is the situation on Earth? Hartley allowed herself a small smile. We are doing something we should have done a long time ago. We are coming together. Jake felt something stir in his chest. Pride, perhaps, or hope. They picked the wrong species to threaten. Yes, they did. Hartley out. The next 48 hours changed human history. Nations that had pointed weapons at each other for generations signed emergency defense pacts. Factories that produced cars and appliances were converted to manufacture weapons and armor. Scientists who had competed for funding now shared research openly. Military forces that had trained to fight each other began joint exercises. Dr. Nathan Price, a xenobiologist working at a university in California, was pulled from his classroom and flown to a secure facility. He was 45, with messy brown hair and glasses that always seemed to be sliding down his nose. He had spent his career studying theoretical alien biology. Now his theories were about to be tested. We need you to analyze everything we can gather about these Zorathi, a military officer told him. Their biology, their psychology, their culture, anything that might help us understand them. Nathan spent hours reviewing the transmission, examining every detail of the aliens' appearance and speech patterns. What he found troubled him. They are confident, he reported to the emergency council. Too confident. They have clearly done this many times before. But there is something else. The way they spoke about resistance leading to extinction, it was casual, like they were discussing the weather. They do not see us as a threat. They do not even see us as enemies. They see us as insects. Admiral Hartley leaned forward. Can we use that? Nathan nodded slowly. Arrogance creates blind spots. They have studied our broadcasts, our signals, our basic information. But I do not think they understand what they are looking at. They see a divided species with primitive technology. They do not see what that division cost us, or what we learned from it. What did we learn? Nathan looked around the room at the faces of leaders from every major nation. We learned how to fight. We have been practicing on each other for 10,000 years. Every war, every conflict, every revolution taught us something. We have made killing into a science and survival into an art. He pulled up images on the screen. Historical photographs. The trenches of the First World War, the ruins of Stalingrad, guerrilla fighters in jungles and mountains. Other species probably evolved in safety. They probably cooperated from the beginning. We did not. We fought for every inch of ground, every scrap of food, every chance at survival. That is who we are. Admiral Hartley stood. Then let us show them. Far above Earth, the Zorathi fleet emerged from hyperspace. 12 massive warships, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built, arranged themselves in perfect formation. Sub-Commander Kethis watched the blue planet on his view screen. Begin broadcasting the compliance request. They should be ready to surrender by now. The communications officer worked his console, then frowned. Sub-Commander, we are receiving no transmissions from the planet. What? The planet has gone silent. All broadcast signals have ceased. Kethis felt something unfamiliar. It took him a moment to recognize it as unease. Every species they had conquered had filled the airways with fear and pleas. The silence was wrong. On the Valiant, Commander Jake Morrison watched the alien fleet on his sensors. He opened a channel to Earth. Admiral, they are here. 12 capital ships, holding position near lunar orbit. Hartley's voice came back steady and cold. Understood. Hold your position. Let them make the first move. Jake smiled grimly. They have no idea what they have just started, do they? No, Hartley replied. But they are about to learn. The Zorathi fleet moved through the solar system like predators through still water. Their ships were beautiful in a terrible way, all sharp angles and gleaming metal, designed to inspire fear in those who saw them coming. Sub-Commander Kethis stood at the tactical display aboard the cruiser Swift Judgment, watching three small human vessels near the asteroid belt. They appeared to be mining ships, slow and clumsy, running away from the approaching Zorathi scouts. "They flee," one of his officers observed. "As expected." Kethis nodded. "Pursue them. We will demonstrate what happens to those who do not surrender immediately." Three Zorathi cruisers broke formation and accelerated toward the fleeing humans. Their engines burned bright against the darkness of space. The mining ships were slow. The cruisers would catch them within minutes. On the lead mining ship, a man named Pete Holloway sat at the controls with a smile on his weathered face. He was 53 years old, a former Navy pilot who had spent the last decade hauling ore from asteroids. When the military had asked for volunteers for this mission, he had been first in line. "They are taking the bait," he said into his communicator. "Right where we want them." A voice crackled back. "Copy that. Lead them through Sector 7. The welcoming committee is ready." Pete pushed his engines harder, making sure the aliens stayed interested. His ship groaned under the strain. She was not built for running, but she only needed to run a little longer. The Zorathi cruisers followed without hesitation. Their sensors showed only three small vessels and a field of dead rocks. Nothing threatening, nothing dangerous. They were wrong. The asteroids had been prepared for this moment. For decades, Earth's governments had hidden weapons throughout the solar system. Nuclear devices, kinetic launchers, and automated defense platforms, all buried beneath rock and dust, waiting for an enemy that many thought would never come. That enemy had arrived. When the Zorathi cruisers entered Sector 7, the asteroids came alive. Pete Holloway pulled his ship into a hard turn and accelerated away as the first nuclear device detonated. The explosion lit up the void like a second sun. The lead Zorathi cruiser, caught at the center of the blast, broke apart instantly. More explosions followed. Kinetic rounds, launched from hidden platforms at incredible speeds, tore through the second cruiser's hull. Automated weapons opened fire from every direction. The aliens had flown into a trap designed by a species that had spent centuries perfecting the art of ambush. The third cruiser managed to turn and flee, but not before taking heavy damage. It limped back toward the main fleet, trailing fire and debris. Kethis received the report in stunned silence. 2 cruisers destroyed. Hundreds of Zorathi dead. The first casualties the Dominion had suffered in over a century. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "They were mining ships. The asteroid field showed no threats." His tactical officer worked frantically at his console. "The weapons were concealed, Sub-Commander, hidden beneath the surface of the rocks. Our sensors could not detect them." "They planned this. They knew we would pursue." The officer hesitated. "It appears so, Sub-Commander." Kethis felt something cold settle in his stomach. He had assumed humans would behave like every other species the Dominion had encountered. He had assumed they would run in genuine fear. Instead, they had used that assumption against him. He opened a channel to High Overseer Veltrak and made his report. Veltrak listened without expression. When Kethis finished, the High Overseer spoke in a calm, measured voice. "This changes nothing. They have surprised us once. They will not do so again. Order the main fleet to advance on their 4th planet. We will establish a forward base and crush any further resistance." On Mars, the Zorathi landing forces descended through the thin atmosphere in armored dropships. They expected minimal resistance. Their intelligence indicated that human presence on the Red Planet was limited to small research stations and mining operations. Captain Amy Reeves watched the alien ships come down from her position in a canyon 3 miles from the primary landing zone. She was 34 years old, lean and hard, with close-cropped dark hair and eyes that missed nothing. She commanded a battalion of Marines who had been training for this moment since the aliens first appeared. "Hold positions," she said quietly into her communicator. "Let them land." Let them think they are safe. Her soldiers were hidden throughout the Martian terrain. They had buried themselves in dust, concealed themselves in caves, and covered their heat signatures with thermal blankets. To Zorathi sensors, the area appeared empty. The aliens landed in perfect formation. Their soldiers emerged from the dropships in ordered lines, weapons ready but held casually. They began establishing a perimeter with the efficiency of long practice. Amy counted to 60. Then she gave the order. Hit them. The canyon erupted with weapons fire. Zorathi soldiers fell by the dozens in the first seconds. They had been caught completely in the open, bunched together, perfect targets. By the time their officers began shouting orders, half their force was already down. What followed was unlike anything the Zorathi had ever experienced. Humans did not fight in lines. They fought like shadows, appearing from nowhere, striking hard and vanishing again. They used the terrain as a weapon, drawing aliens into kill zones and ambush points. When the Zorathi adapted to one tactic, the humans had already moved to another. Sergeant Chris Dunham led a squad through a network of tunnels that the Zorathi did not know existed. They emerged behind enemy lines and opened fire on a command post, killing 3 high-ranking officers before disappearing again. A Zorathi energy blast caught Chris in the shoulder, spinning him around. Another hit his leg. A third burned across his chest. Any Zorathi soldier would have been incapacitated by such wounds. Chris kept fighting. He dragged himself behind a rock formation, bleeding heavily, and watched a group of Zorathi soldiers advance past his position toward a fuel depot that the aliens had established. He looked at the detonator in his hand. "This is going to hurt," he muttered to himself. He pressed the button. The explosion killed 47 Zorathi soldiers. Chris survived, barely, protected by the rock he had sheltered behind. When medics found him 2 hours later, he was still conscious, still holding his weapon, still watching for enemies. The battle for Mars lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the Zorathi landing force had been destroyed almost to the last soldier. Human casualties were significant, but far lower than any projections had predicted. On the Dominion flagship, Elder Savan requested an audience with High Overseer Veltrak. Savan was ancient even by Zorathi standards, a scholar who had spent his life studying conquered species. What he had learned about humans disturbed him deeply. "I have analyzed their historical broadcasts," Savan told the High Overseer. "Their entertainment, their news, their recorded history. What I have found is troubling." Veltrak gestured for him to continue. "They have been practicing for this," Savan said. "Their entire history is warfare. They have fought each other continuously for thousands of years. They have weapons designed to destroy their own world many times over. They create simulations of alien invasions for entertainment." He paused. "Overseer, this species does not fear death. They celebrate warriors. They tell stories of heroes who died fighting against impossible odds. They consider such deaths honorable." Veltrak considered this. "You are saying they are insane. I am saying they are dangerous, far more dangerous than we anticipated. We have always conquered species that evolved for cooperation, species that surrendered when faced with superior force. Humans did not evolve that way. They are predators who have spent their existence competing against each other. We are not facing prey, Overseer. We are facing something that has never existed in our experience." Veltrak dismissed the elder with a wave of his hand. "The Dominion has superior numbers, superior technology, and 5 centuries of conquest behind us. A few clever tricks do not change the fundamental reality of this situation." But as Savan left the chamber, Veltrak found himself staring at the tactical display showing the debris of his cruisers and the casualty reports from Mars. For the first time in his long career, he felt the faintest whisper of doubt. On Earth, Admiral Lisa Hartley received the battle reports with grim satisfaction. They had won the first engagements, but she knew the real war was just beginning. They will come with everything they have now, she told her staff. We have made them angry. That is both good and dangerous. Commander Jake Morrison's voice came through the communication system. What are your orders, Admiral? Hartley looked at the map of the solar system, at the tiny blue dot that represented everything humanity had ever known. Now we show them what humans can really do. The war had been raging for 3 months when the Zorathi began to understand their mistake. It was not the battles that broke them. It was the waiting. Zorathi soldiers had been trained to fight against enemies who stood in neat formations and surrendered when outmatched. Humans did neither. Sub-Commander Kethis had not slept properly in weeks. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw human faces, not screaming, not begging, just watching, waiting, planning. They are in the walls, one of his soldiers had whispered before being sent to the medical bay for psychological treatment. They are always in the walls. The soldier was not wrong. Humans had turned every occupied space into a nightmare. They hid in maintenance shafts, in ventilation systems, in spaces too small for Zorathi bodies. They struck without warning and vanished without trace. They left traps that killed soldiers days after the humans themselves had moved on. But it was not just the ground war that was going badly. Dr. Nathan Price led a team of specialists in a facility deep beneath the Nevada desert. Their mission was simple: crack the Zorathi communication systems. Every other conquered species had taken decades to even attempt such a task. Human hackers accomplished it in 23 days. "We are in," Nathan announced to Admiral Hartley during a secure video conference. "Full access to their military communications network." Hartley leaned forward. "What can we do with it?" Nathan smiled. It was not a nice smile. "Anything we want." The chaos began within hours. False orders redirected supply ships to empty regions of space. Fleet positions were leaked to human commanders. Conflicting instructions created confusion in the Zorathi chain of command. Soldiers received messages telling them to retreat, then advance, then hold position, until nobody knew what was real anymore. High Overseer Veltrak raged at his communications officers. "How is this possible? Our encryption is unbreakable." "It was unbreakable," Elder Savan corrected quietly. "Against every species we have encountered before. Humans appear to have spent considerable effort developing the skill of breaking into secure systems. They call it hacking. They do it to each other constantly. For money, for politics, sometimes simply for entertainment. They break into each other's secure networks for fun?" "Yes, Overseer." "They seem to find it amusing." Veltrak stared at the Elder for a long moment. Then he turned to his tactical display, where red warning indicators were spreading across dozens of systems. On Earth, Admiral Hartley launched the first true offensive operation. 12 human vessels gathered at the edge of the solar system. They were a mix of converted civilian ships and purpose-built warships, crewed entirely by volunteers who understood they might never come home. Commander Jake Morrison commanded the small fleet from the bridge of the Valiant. "You all know the mission," he told his crews. "We are going to hit them where it hurts. Not their military, their reputation." The target was a slave processing facility on a world called Karath 4. According to intercepted communications, thousands of beings from a dozen conquered species were held there, waiting to be sorted and assigned to labor camps across the Dominion. The human fleet jumped into Zorathi space and emerged directly above the facility. The defenders, expecting an attack on military targets, were caught completely off guard. Captain Amy Reeves led the ground assault. Her Marines dropped from orbit in armored pods, landing in a ring around the facility. Within minutes, they had breached the outer defenses and were fighting their way inside. What they found would haunt them for years, rows upon rows of cells, each containing beings who had given up hope, creatures of all shapes and sizes, their spirits broken by years of captivity. When the Marines opened the first cell block, the prisoners did not try to escape. They simply stared, unable to believe what they were seeing. Amy knelt beside a small being with blue skin and large eyes. It flinched away from her, expecting punishment. "It is okay," she said gently. "We are here to help. We are humans." The creature looked at her with confusion. "Humans? The new conquest? Why would you help us?" Amy helped the creature to its feet. "Because nobody should have to live like this, and because we do not plan on being conquered." The liberation was broadcast live across every frequency the human hackers could reach. Across the galaxy, species that had long accepted Zorathi rule watched in stunned silence as humans, the supposed easy conquest, fought their way through a Dominion facility and set prisoners free. It was the first time anyone had ever fought back. It would not be the last. On the Dominion homeworld, High Overseer Veltrak ordered a complete psychological profile of humanity. The results arrived 3 days later. He read them in silence, his 4 eyes moving across the screen with increasing disbelief. Humans were persistence predators. On their homeworld, they had hunted prey not by outrunning it or overpowering it, but by simply following it until it collapsed from exhaustion. They did not need to be faster or stronger than their targets. They only needed to keep coming. Their bodies were designed for endurance. They could run for hours without stopping. They could survive injuries that would kill most other species. They could lose limbs, suffer massive blood loss, and continue functioning. Their healing capabilities were remarkable. Given time and basic medical care, they could recover from almost anything. But it was their psychology that truly terrified the Zorathi analysts. Humans bonded. They formed deep emotional attachments to their units, their ships, their commanders. When one human died, the others did not retreat to preserve themselves. They attacked harder. They sought revenge with a fury that defied all rational calculation. They also adapted faster than any species in the Dominion's records. Human tactics evolved daily, sometimes hourly. When the Zorathi developed a countermeasure for one approach, humans had already moved to 3 others. They shared information constantly, learning from each battle and spreading that knowledge across their entire force. The report concluded with a single recommendation: immediate withdrawal from human space and permanent quarantine of the Sol system. Veltrak threw the report across the room. "We are the Zorathi Dominion," he snarled. "We have conquered 3,000 worlds. We do not retreat from primitives." But his hands were shaking. Commander Jake Morrison returned from the Karath 4 mission to find a hero's welcome. But he did not feel like celebrating. He had seen what the Zorathi did to their conquered peoples. He had seen the broken spirits and the dead eyes. He had seen what waited for humanity if they lost. He stood before Admiral Hartley and the War Council, still wearing the dust of battle. "We cannot just defend," he said. "We have to take the fight to them. We have to make them understand that attacking humanity was the worst decision their empire ever made." Hartley nodded slowly. "What do you propose?" Jake pulled up a map of Zorathi space. "Their empire runs on communication. Orders flow from Central Command to every fleet, every world, every outpost. We take out their communication hub, and we cripple their entire operation." One of the generals shook his head. "That facility is protected by 200 warships and orbital defense platforms. Attacking it would be suicide." Jake smiled grimly. "Only by their standards." Hartley looked at the faces around the table. Men and women from every nation, united by a threat that none of them could face alone. She saw determination in their eyes. She saw the spirit that had carried humanity through countless trials across thousands of years. "Plan the mission," she ordered, "and find me volunteers." She did not need to look hard. Every soldier in the human military stepped forward. Every pilot, every marine, every sailor who had heard what the Zorathi did to the species they conquered. They were not going to be slaves. They were not going to be labor. They were going to show the galaxy what happened when you threatened the most dangerous species in existence. Humanity was done defending. Now, they would attack. 6 months into the war, the Zorathi Dominion experienced something it had not known in 500 years. Fear. Reports flooded into High Overseer Veltrak's command center from across the Empire. Human ships had been spotted in 17 different systems. Slave facilities had been raided. Supply lines had been cut. Loyal populations were beginning to ask questions that had never been asked before. If humans could fight back, why could we not? Veltrak stood before a holographic map of his crumbling empire, watching red warning indicators spread like a disease. His officers moved around him in quiet desperation, trying to coordinate responses to attacks that came from everywhere and nowhere. "How many ships do they have?" Veltrak demanded. His tactical officer hesitated. "We are uncertain, Overseer. Their vessels appear and disappear without warning. Our best estimate is fewer than 50 combat-capable ships." 50 ships. We have thousands. Yes, Overseer. But they do not fight like any enemy we have faced. They strike and vanish. They target our weakest points. They seem to know our movements before we make them. Thanks to human hackers still buried deep in the Dominion communication network, they did. Commander Jake Morrison sat in the captain's chair of the Valiant, now upgraded with weapons salvaged from destroyed Zorathi vessels. Around him, a strike force of 24 ships prepared for the most ambitious mission humanity had ever attempted. Their target was the Central Communication Hub, a massive station at the heart of Dominion space. Every military order, every fleet coordination, every piece of intelligence flowed through this single point. Destroy it, and the Zorathi war machine would be crippled. The station was protected by 200 warships and orbital defense platforms capable of destroying moons. By any reasonable assessment, the attack was impossible. Jake had stopped believing in impossible 6 months ago. "All ships, report status," he ordered. One by one, his captains confirmed readiness. They were volunteers, every one of them. They knew the odds. They had chosen to come anyway. "Admiral Hartley sends her regards," his communications officer reported. "She says, and I quote, 'Make them remember this day.'" Jake allowed himself a small smile. "Oh, they will remember. All ships jump on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark." 24 human vessels vanished from normal space and reappeared in the heart of the Zorathi Dominion. The defenders were not surprised. They had known the humans were coming. What surprised them was what the humans did next. Instead of attacking the station directly, the human ships scattered in 24 different directions. They weaved through the defensive fleet, drawing fire, creating chaos, refusing to present a unified target. Zorathi ships crashed into each other trying to track the fast-moving humans. Defense platforms fired blindly, sometimes hitting friendly vessels. "What are they doing?" Sub-Commander Kethis demanded from his position in the defensive fleet. "This makes no tactical sense." But it did make sense. The human ships were not trying to destroy the Zorathi fleet. They were trying to distract it. While the space battle raged, a single transport ship slipped through the chaos. It was small, unremarkable, and running with minimal power. It drifted toward the station like a piece of debris. Inside, Captain Amy Reeves checked her equipment one final time. Around her, 200 Marines prepared for the most dangerous boarding action in human history. "Remember your training," she told them. "Speed and violence. Do not give them time to think. Do not give them time to react. We go in hard, we hit our objectives, and we get out." "And if we cannot get out?" one of her sergeants asked. Amy looked at him steadily. "Then we make sure the mission succeeds anyway." Nobody argued. They all knew what they had signed up for. The transport attached to the station hull with magnetic clamps, cutting torches burned through the metal, and then humans poured into the Zorathi station like water through a broken dam. The fighting was brutal. Zorathi security forces had been warned of a possible boarding attempt, but nothing had prepared them for what humans could do in close quarters. The Marines moved through corridors designed for beings twice their size, using the awkward dimensions to their advantage. They crawled through spaces too small for Zorathi bodies. They attacked from angles that should have been impossible. Amy led her team toward the primary communication array, fighting through every step. She took a plasma burn to her arm and kept moving. She watched friends fall and kept moving. She pushed through pain and exhaustion and fear because stopping was not an option. They reached the array control room to find it defended by 50 Zorathi soldiers, 50 against 23 surviving Marines. "Grenades!" Amy ordered. "Then we go in." The explosions shook the room. The Marines followed immediately, firing as they entered. The Zorathi, disoriented by the blasts, fell back in confusion. By the time they regrouped, half their number was down. The battle lasted 4 minutes. When it was over, Amy stood in a room full of dead aliens, her weapon empty, her body screaming with pain. Around her, 11 Marines remained standing. "Set the charges," she ordered, "and find me a way to broadcast." Dr. Nathan Price had given her a special program before the mission, a virus designed to spread through the Zorathi network like wildfire, corrupting data, issuing false commands, and leaving a message that every being in the Dominion would see. Amy uploaded the virus and opened a broadcast channel. "Attention, Zorathi Dominion," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the Empire. "This is Captain Amy Reeves of the Human Marine Corps. Your communication hub is now under our control. Your network is compromised. Your war is lost." She paused, letting the words sink in across 1,000 worlds. "You came to our home and demanded our surrender. You threatened us with extinction. You thought we would bow like every other species you have conquered. You were wrong." Alarms began blaring throughout the station. Reinforcements were coming. Amy kept talking. "We are humans. We have been fighting since before your empire existed. We will keep fighting until our last breath. And we do not forget. We do not forgive. Every world you have enslaved, every species you have crushed, every crime you have committed in the name of your dominion, we will remember." The first Zorathi soldiers appeared in the doorway. Her Marines opened fire. "This is not the end of your war," Amy continued. "This is the beginning of your reckoning." She triggered the charges. The explosion destroyed the primary communication array. Across the galaxy, Zorathi fleets lost contact with Central Command. Orders stopped flowing. Coordination collapsed. The machine that had run the Dominion for 500 years ground to a halt. On the Dominion homeworld, Elder Savan stood before the Council and delivered his final assessment. He played recordings from human history, soldiers charging into certain death at Normandy, resistance fighters holding out in Warsaw, pilots flying into battle against impossible odds over Britain. "We did not invade a primitive species," Savan told them. "We invaded something that should have been left alone. They have spent their entire existence learning to survive. They turned their own world into a crucible and emerged stronger for it. We have awakened something that cannot be put back to sleep." High Overseer Veltrak sat in silence, his 4 eyes staring at nothing. The empire he had served his entire life was crumbling around him. His fleets were scattered, his communications destroyed, his reputation shattered. A message arrived from human space. Admiral Hartley's face appeared on the screen, calm and cold. "We received your request for negotiations," she said. "Our answer is no. We do not negotiate with those who threatened our extinction. You wanted war with humanity. Now you have it, and we will not stop until your dominion is a memory." The transmission ended. Veltrak, for the first time in his long life, knew true fear. The humans were coming, and they would not stop. The Zorathi Dominion did not fall in a single day. It fell slowly, like a great tree rotting from within, until one final push sent it crashing to the ground. Without their central communication network, Zorathi fleets drifted aimlessly across the galaxy. Orders did not arrive, supplies did not flow. Worlds that had been held together by fear and force began to slip away. And wherever cracks appeared, humans were there to widen them. Commander Jake Morrison led a task force that moved from system to system, not conquering but liberating. They would appear above a Zorathi-controlled world, broadcast the same message in 100 languages, and wait. People of this world, we are humans. We are not here to rule you. We are here to offer you a choice. If you wish to be free, we will help you. If the Zorathi try to stop you, we will stand beside you. Some worlds rejected the offer, too afraid of Zorathi revenge to believe freedom was possible. But many more rose up. Species that had spent generations under the boot of the Dominion remembered what it meant to hope. Captain Amy Reeves, recovered from her wounds at the communication hub, led ground operations on a dozen different worlds. She trained resistance fighters, coordinated uprisings, and stood on the front lines whenever her presence could inspire others to keep fighting. On a world called Verith Prime, she watched as beings who had never held weapons learned to defend themselves. They were small creatures, barely reaching her waist, with soft fur and large eyes. The Zorathi had used them as servants for centuries. "Why do you help us?" their leader asked her one evening. "You do not know us. You gain nothing from our freedom." Amy considered the question. She thought about Earth, about her family, about everything humanity had built over thousands of years. She thought about what the Zorathi would have taken from them if they had succeeded. "Because someone should," she said finally. "Because the Zorathi thought they could do whatever they wanted to anyone weaker than them. And because we want the galaxy to know that there is another way. You do not have to be cruel to be strong." The little being looked at her with something like wonder. "Your species is very strange." Amy laughed. "Yes, we know." The final battle came 9 months after the war began. Jake Morrison led the largest human fleet ever assembled toward the Zorathi homeworld. They were not alone. Ships from 17 different species had joined them, freed peoples who wanted to see the end of the empire that had enslaved them. High Overseer Veltrak watched them come from his throne room. The fleet that had once numbered in the thousands was reduced to a few hundred vessels. Many of his own officers had deserted or surrendered. The great Zorathi Dominion, 500 years of conquest, was ending. Elder Savan stood beside him. "I told you," the elder said quietly. "I told you what they were." Veltrak did not respond. There was nothing left to say. The human fleet did not attack immediately. Instead, Jake Morrison broadcast a message to the planet below. "People of Zorathi Prime, this is Commander Jake Morrison of Earth. We have come to end your government's reign of terror. But we have not come to destroy you. We offer you the same choice we have offered every world. Lay down your weapons, release your slaves, and accept responsibility for what your empire has done. Do this, and there will be peace. Refuse, and we will do what we must." The response came not from Veltrak, but from the Zorathi people themselves. Across the planet, citizens who had grown tired of endless war and the shame of their empire's crimes took to the streets. They demanded surrender. They demanded change. Within hours, the military had stood down, the slaves had been released, and High Overseer Veltrak had been removed from power by his own council. Jake Morrison landed in the central plaza of the Zorathi capital with a small escort. Around him, beings who had once ruled the galaxy watched with expressions of shock and confusion. Jake walked forward to face the remnants of the Zorathi leadership. He was tired. He had lost friends, watched good people die, and seen horrors that would stay with him forever. But he had also seen humanity at its best, united, determined, and unbreakable. He spoke slowly, ensuring every translator captured his words. You looked at us and saw prey. You saw a small species stuck in one system fighting among ourselves. You thought that made us weak. He paused, letting the words sink in. You were wrong. We fight each other because we are strong enough to survive it. We have clawed our way up from darkness and built civilizations on the bones of our failures. Every war taught us something. Every disaster made us stronger. You saw division where you should have seen practice. He gestured to the human soldiers behind him, men and women from every nation, every background standing together as one. We are not the strongest species in the galaxy. We are not the fastest or the most advanced. But we possess something you never understood. We do not give up. We do not surrender. We keep fighting until we win, or until there is nothing left of us to fight. One of the Zorathi leaders, a former general, asked the question that had haunted them since the war began. What are you? Jake met the alien's 4 eyes without flinching. We are human, and you should have left us alone. The war was over, but its effects would be felt for generations. Earth became the center of a new alliance, not an empire, but a coalition of free peoples working together for mutual benefit. Dr. Nathan Price established a cultural exchange program that helped former slave species rebuild their identities after centuries of oppression. Captain Amy Reeves, now Admiral, commanded the first truly multi-species fleet in galactic history. Her crews included former Zorathi, who had rejected their empire's legacy and chosen to build something better. Commander Jake Morrison retired to a small farm on Earth's Pacific coast. He had seen enough war for one lifetime. But occasionally, when diplomatic missions required someone who could speak with authority about what humanity had accomplished, he would put on his uniform one more time. The galaxy had changed. Where once the Zorathi Dominion had ruled through fear, now a dozen new nations were finding their way toward freedom. It would not be easy. Old wounds do not heal quickly. But for the first time in 500 years, the future was not predetermined. In the archives of every inhabited world, a new entry was added to the database of known species. Species, human origin, Sol system, third planet. Classification, persistence, predator, status, do not engage. The entry included a detailed history of the war and a summary of human capabilities. But at the bottom, someone had added a simple note that captured everything the galaxy had learned. When faced with impossible odds, they fight harder. When their friends fall, they seek revenge. When threatened with extinction, they become extinction. They are not the strongest, but they are the most stubborn species ever recorded. They simply refuse to lose. The Zorathi learned this lesson the hard way. Others would be wise to remember it, because humanity was done being underestimated. They had taken their place among the stars, and the galaxy would never be the same. In homes across Earth, parents told their children the story of the war, how humanity had stood together against an empire that stretched across thousands of worlds, how ordinary people had done extraordinary things, how courage and determination had overcome technology and numbers. And in schools across the galaxy, students of 100 different species learned about the small blue planet that had changed everything. They learned about humans, the strange beings who fought each other for practice and forged weapons capable of destroying their own world. They learned about persistence predators who never stopped chasing their prey. Most importantly, they learned the lesson that the Zorathi had paid so dearly to teach. Never threaten humanity, because they will make you regret it. Every single time.